Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Episode 10, Average Joe, Educator, Astronaut. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So if you're new to the show, this is where we bring in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, pretty much all the folks that have the coolest information, the stuff you really want to know, right on the show. I'll tell you more about everything NASA. So today, we're talking with Joe Acaba. He's a U.S. astronaut, and he just launched to the International Space Station a few days ago on September 12, 2017, for his second long-duration mission aboard the orbiting complex. We talked about his time in the Marine Corps and Peace Corps, his previous missions to space, and his background as a high school and middle school educator, and a little bit about how he views the importance of being an educator in space. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Mr. Joe Acaba. Enjoy.
Minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. Launch commit lights are correct. Here she goes.
Houston, we have a podcast.
Okay, well, thanks for coming on the show today, Joe. I know you're very busy, especially coming so close to your launch date. And like we just talked about before, you have an accelerated training program. You're not doing the 2-year thing. You're doing 6 months. So you're kind of got a pretty jam-packed schedule, huh?
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we found the time. And it is it's a little bit unique where usually our training flow is, depending on your experience, 18 months to 2 years. And I got a whole 6 months. So it's time is busy, but it's going really well.
Very cool. All right, well, how do you feel about now going on your second long-duration mission? You went on your first one back in 2012, so this is kind of pretty close, right? 2012, 2017, so not bad.
I can't complain. 5 years in between missions is pretty good. I know it might seem like a long time for a lot of people, but I'm pretty fortunate. And I'm excited to get back up there. Every mission is different. Of course, you have different crewmates, different science experiments that are going on. So yeah, I'm pretty excited and ready to happen. It's just a couple of months away.
That's awesome. Well, since we have you here today and we could do a full episode, which is super fortunate that we actually have this much time, I figured we'd just go through your story, all the way from when you grew up in California back to, what you're doing now and what you're planning on doing on Expedition 5354. And then maybe, since you are an educator, maybe a little bit about education in space, what you feel about it, how it's kind of important. So
sounds good. I'll try not to bore you too much.
You're an astronaut. You cannot be boring. Anything you say is amazing.
You'll have to steer me along on this one.
Okay, so, growing up in California, right? So you grew up there and then went into college, Bachelor of Science. But I remember talking to you beforehand. You were interested, a metal shop class actually it kind of influenced you a little bit of your career and the beginning of your education, right?
Yeah, it's funny that a lot of people will ask you about your schooling and education or what was really important in your life.
Yeah.
And, one thing I always reflect back on were these 4 years of metal shop with Mr. Walters that we all called Walt, and I stay in touch with him, and he's now retired after, I don't know if it was 35 years of teaching. But
wow.
When you look at what we did in that metal shop class, that dude was crazy. You know how crazy high school kids are in general.
Yeah.
And kids that age don't always make the best decisions. And now here you are, and being a former educator, when I see someone like him who had 30 kids in a class and they're all doing different things in a metal shop,
yeah,
it was pretty amazing.
You're working with some intense equipment, right? Something could go wrong, but as an educator, he had to trust you guys to do the right thing and lead you in the right path, I guess.
He did. It took a lot of training before we started, but again, we had all the pieces of equipment that you would find in any metal shop. Lathes they're churning at a fast speed where you can do a lot of damage to yourself, the equipment.
Yeah.
We did gas welding. We did arc welding, which I wouldn't today give a 15-year-old kid a gas welder, let alone in a class with 30 kids. So
yeah.
He did that, and then we had a foundry where we were, no kidding, we were melting stuff and pouring it in there and making things. And I still today I look back and I don't know how he did it, and for all those years, but it was one of the best experiences that I had because I learned a lot, about myself, what I'm capable of doing. It's, of course, at home. I wasn't a big mechanic type dude, but you learned a lot. But then you also had to, be responsible, and you had to be accountable to yourself. And I think a lot of times we miss that, and we don't realize how responsible kids can be because we don't give them that responsibility. And he gave it to us, and we had to run with it. And I'm glad to still be alive after that class.
Yeah, a lot of tangible lessons coming from that class for sure, too. You're talking, responsibility. I wouldn't think about that, but it makes total sense. You're working with heavy equipment. You got to make sure you have the responsibility in yourself to do the right thing.
Yeah, he can't watch 30 kids at one time, and so. I think what he did and what I took as an educator is, you kind of start with small steps. You got to guide the student, but at some point you got to let him go and hopefully use the information that you gave him. And he was one of the best teachers ever at doing that and what he allowed us to do.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot about trust, too. It seems like it's a valuable one.
Yeah, and maybe being crazy. I think he was a little crazy. No, but we all loved him.
A lot of trust, a little crazy.
Yeah, but, and he was, one of the more strict teachers that I had, but it was in a way that you knew it was for your own benefit. Even back then, you understood why he was doing what he did.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot, of course, while I was in that class, but then as an educator, often I would look back at how he was and, tried to imitate him as much as I could. So,
yeah,
owe him a lot.
So, was it his style of teaching? Was it him as a teacher that made you really like the metal shop class, like you said, or was it the material? Maybe a combination of both.
It was probably a combination of both, but
okay.
I could see where if it was a different teacher that didn't allow you to work the way we did, I might not have enjoyed it. Where I could see, a teacher that said, okay, you're only gonna do this, and I'm gonna watch you do things every step of the way. It might not have been as enjoyable. Where he gave us a lot of freedom, and I think that was pretty appealing. At that age to have that freedom and that responsibility that somebody has given to you.
Right. So, from there, you went to University of California, Santa Barbara, and graduated with Bachelor of Science in Geology. How do you go from metal shop to a science bachelor's?
Well, I think the geology thing came from, how we grew up. One thing that every summer we would go camping. That was just kind of our thing, maybe because...
Love the outdoors, yeah.
It was pretty free to do that. So, I'm sure my parents enjoyed that where, we weren't hopping on a plane going to Europe, so that was not something we could do. But going camping was relatively inexpensive, but it was always fun to get outdoors and always enjoyed that. And growing up, of course, just, being out in the natural environment. So you go to college and you think about all the different things you could do. Geology just sounded like, hey, this is cool. I get to study stuff that's outside, and now I can look at, hey, why does the mountain look like that? Why is the river here? And so geology has just seemed like the perfect match for me.
That's awesome. In school, what kinds of assignments did you have in college? What kind of assignments did you have that really kind of stick with you?
Again, I think some of the best classes when we were outside doing field mapping and things like that, where, it's not always the most fun having to identify 100 different minerals or rocks and go, okay, this is your final exam. And it was kind of cool that you could do that. And it was fun being able to look in the microscope and be able to identify different minerals. But for me personally, and it was just being outside and, kind of walking around and looking at what's out there, looking inside the rocks, what might you find inside the rocks. And, being a geologist, it's such a wide field that there are some folks that, like to focus in on the small, and I just enjoyed more of the big and being outside.
So after that, you went for a master's in geology, correct? So you wanted to continue your education. What made you want to do that?
Well, it seems like I wanted to continue. Like I tell people, I didn't want to continue after high school. My dad kind of forced me into going to college, where I just again, being in metal shop, I was happy working with my hands. And
yeah, you wanted to do the tech stuff.
I wanted to go tech, and
Yeah.
I thought that I had the best plan. I'm going to go do solar panels, and I'm going to go straight to a tech school, and my dad wasn't having that at the time. And so after a few arguments, he beat me down enough, not physically, but he won that battle, and he convinced me to do 1 year of college and said, hey, just try it out, and if you hate it, that's cool, at least you tried it. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate that push that he gave me, because otherwise I may not have done that. And then after I finished my degree, I thought about joining the U.S. Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. But again, I keep going back to education, not because I was an educator, but just because of the value of it.
Right.
One of my instructors, he told me about a grant that was out there to get my master's degree.
Oh.
And I was kind of tired of being in school. You've pretty much been in school your whole life, and so you're ready to do something different. But he told me about this that was out there, so I ended up getting my master's at the University of Arizona.
So it was through that grant then?
It was through that, that helped pay for it.
Yeah.
And again, it took an educator to kind of push me in that direction. So, he may not know. I've talked to him a few times, but he may not know the impact that had in going to get your master's degree was, of course, you learn a lot, but it's those little things that help you get where you are today.
Yeah. So did that help you? What the next step was that you went into the Marine Corps? Was that the next step?
Well, I did the Marine Corps while I was in my doing my undergraduate studies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I had some buddies of mine, and we were hanging out, and we thought, hey, this would be a cool idea. Let's join the Marine Corps. And none of us backed out, and so we.
All right.
So
it's a good group of friends then.
Yeah. So we ended up. I actually went to boot camp with a couple of friends of mine, which was it was pretty cool, and of course, we're still great friends.
Good.
And so I've done quite a few things in my life that my parents don't approve of, and of course, joining the Marine Corps was not one of their favorite choices that I made. But it all worked out great, and. Yeah, so that all happened while I was in college.
All right. So that was in the Marine Corps. You were a hydrogeologist?
Nope. So.
Oh wow, I'm getting all this wrong.
That's okay. It's a complicated story, and I can barely keep it straight. So when I did the Marine Corps Reserve, we were working in communication, a field wireman, doing that type of work, and it just happened that the 6 years as a Marine Corps Reserve ended. When I finished up with my master's degree. It took me a while to get through school. And so when I left with my master's degree, that's when I worked out as a hydrogeologist in California.
I see. Okay, so that sounds like such an interesting job. What is a hydrogeologist? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's, you got the hydro in there, so you're dealing with water, and then you got earth stuff going on. But I always knew that even when I was thinking about the tech world, doing solar energy, I've always been kind of environmental related.
Okay.
And so ended up working with an environmental consulting firm. So when you're a hydrogeologist, a lot of times you're looking at, how does groundwater flow? What kind of contaminants does it have?
Okay.
And being in Southern California, there's, a lot of it when you think about the industry that was going on, back in the 50s and 60s and things like that, that, there's quite a bit of contamination out there. So a lot of our job was, mapping that, and then how do you remediate it? How do you clean the water? How do you clean the soil that's there? So, a lot of geologists, they may go into the energy industry, but, I kind of went more in the environmental area.
Very cool. So I feel like I'm going to mess this up again, so I'm
That's
just going
all
to
right.
ask.
Hey, might as well.
So what happened? What happened next? I know there's Peace Corps, but then also manager of Caribbean Marine Research Center. I don't know which one came first, but they both sound amazing.
Yep, you got it right. So I worked as a hydrogeologist for, I don't know, maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay.
And I was looking at the Peace Corps when I was doing my undergraduate work, and I had applied for the Peace Corps before. Mr. Sylvester directed me over to getting my master's degree. And so I kind of put the Peace Corps on hold, but it was always something I still wanted to do. I don't know, I just wanted to do this public service and thought it was an important agency. So after working for a while, it just seemed like a good time to pursue that. And so just quit the job and became a volunteer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bold move.
Again, disappointing the parents every step of the way. It was not what they wanted to hear, that I was going to become a volunteer.
Yeah.
But,
so what was it about the Peace Corps that really drove you, and then what did you do when you were in there?
Maybe it was, recruiters coming out and talking about the work that the Peace Corps does. It's a pretty unique agency that President Kennedy started, and it kind of has a few different goals, but it's to go out to third world countries and help them with the needs that they identify. So it's not, us going there and saying, hey, you got to fix this, but them identifying projects and requesting volunteers to go there to work on those. But it's also a great opportunity for the U.S. to send, these young people out there, not that all are young, but, as representatives of the U.S. So every Peace Corps volunteer is like an ambassador that's out there representing our country. So that seemed pretty appealing. And then, of course, when you come back, sharing that story. And I worked in environmental education.
Okay.
So the environmental part, I'd kind of established with what I was doing, and education to me was, in terms of being an educator, was new, but it also sounded appealing. And I think after doing that, it kind of led me to being an educator. So.
Okay, so it was. It sounded like it's a little bit of the Peace Corps, but then also you keep referring to your experiences with Walt and Mr. Sylvester, these key people in your life that kind of inspired you. And I guess, in a sense, would you say it's kind of, you wanted to kind of emulate that? You wanted to be that person, maybe?
I guess now that you say that, but it wasn't like
I don't wanna put words in your mouth.
But of course, and I think it's the way with most students and most people is
Sure.
You don't realize what is going on at the time. It's I never would have thought while I was in metal shop going, man, this is changing my life, this is really cool, or hey, thanks Dr. Sylvester for sending me to get my master's. It's one of those where I think that we don't always realize the opportunities that are there. And so either you have to be smart enough or lucky enough to seize those opportunities. And I think in my case, it was I was lucky enough to have those people that did that. And so, again, with the Peace Corps, was just another kind of step in the right direction, and just learned a lot that helped me as an educator, and I think helped me a lot as an astronaut today.
Wow, awesome! It really only takes one. I mean, a similar story with me. It was Mr. McCoskey. He was a film and TV teacher, and I took his film and TV class, and I was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to do this is what I want to do. And it was the same thing. He trusted the students with all this expensive equipment, and we just went out and made some great films and cool stuff. And it kind of helped me out.
All right. We'll give him that shout out.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be listening to this. That's cool.
I hope so. So, you said that's what led you to be an educator, and you started as a high school educator, right?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
I did 1 year as a 9th and 10th grade integrated science teacher.
Okay.
And then ended up moving to the middle school, and that's a whole, we could probably spend a couple hours talking about middle school education. But to me, and I think every teacher is different, and teachers feel comfortable with different age groups, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy the middle school as much as I did. It's a crazy time, for parents that have middle school age kids. They know what they're,
there's a lot going through at that age.
There's a lot going on with those kids. And, a lot of kids at that age, they don't know, as they shouldn't, what they want to do in life. But some of the decisions you make, early on can really dictate that initial path that you might take. And so I feel like there's a lot of room during those ages to motivate kids to enjoy school. And of course, I like the sciences and math, so trying to make that fun and exciting so they don't leave middle school going, I hate math, or those kids that say, oh, I'm terrible at math. Well, it's probably because you haven't had somebody that taught it in a way that you could understand. And so I tell people, hey, it's not always you, and it's just it could be the teacher just didn't quite get it right for you. And, we're all different. And so it's just finding that way to motivate a student.
Yeah, it was the same way, right? I had my fair share of science teachers that were they literally put up in the projectors, they just put up pages of the textbook, and we just had to write down the notes, and it was just wildly boring, but it was such an interesting subject, right? It was biology for me, and it just didn't work. But then, next year I had a chemistry teacher who lit stuff on fire day one, and I was like, this is awesome. Chemistry's amazing. But you're right. It's
on fire.
So what did you do to really get, to try to get them to actually like math and science?
I think it's as much hands-on as you can do.
That's what I would think, light stuff on fire.
But, if you can light stuff on fire, the classroom kids are going to love you. Principal might not love you, but, but it is hard being an educator today. And I think it's always been hard because you're always torn between you have standardized testing and, you have to have your kids at a certain level, but you also want to make it exciting for the kids. So it's kind of finding that balance and trying to make it as exciting as you can. And every kid likes science. I mean, as a kid, every kid, we're all scientists.
Curious in a way.
You're curious, you like playing with bugs, you want to be outside, whatever. I mean, science is just, it's cool. And
it is.
But over the years, I think as you go through school, if everything you do in science is out of a book, it's no longer fun. And then, somehow we lose this kind of love for science. And so as much as you can do as an educator to keep it fun and to be that teacher that a kid will look back and go, that was a cool class. I learned a lot, but we had fun doing it. And I think that's the key.
Those were always the moments that I go back to, with my science classes, from, physics, taking a slinky outside in the hallway and just shaking it around and seeing how waves work,
Right.
Instead of just describing waves or reading from a book, let's shake it and figure it out, It's those little moments that really, I think, they're fun. They're really cool. You're outside the classroom actually doing stuff. And it sounds like you're kind of the same way, especially with metal shop class, actually hands-on. You want to touch stuff. You want to do stuff.
You got to do it. The books are great. They have their place, but you got to be hands-on, and that's always the challenge I found with math is that, math takes a little bit more work to make it hands-on and to make it exciting. It's if you like math, it's cool and it's exciting, but if you're somebody who doesn't like math, it's hard to make it exciting.
Yeah.
And so I think the exciting part is when a student understands a concept and you've helped them kind of get to that point. But nothing worse than having a kid leave your class that says, man, I hate math and I'm terrible at math. Then you're just like, man, I didn't do that kid right. So it is a challenge. Some classes, of course, you're teaching about space or you're teaching about dinosaurs. Every kid loves that. So
sure,
that's kind of easy. But it's those other subjects that aren't always as much fun that are more challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I guess sometimes it just comes down to just for natural skill in a way, right? So sometimes it just clicks, and sometimes it takes a little extra to click, and sometimes it never clicks.
Yeah,
so
and,
that's always a bummer, though.
But hopefully you can make it. I think everybody has the ability. It might take a little bit more work on the part of the teacher and the part of the student.
Yeah.
Where some things are naturally easy, but if they're not, that's okay. But you can. I always tell people you don't need to be the smartest dude out there, but you can always be the hardest working person out there. Nobody can stop you from working hard. And sometimes it just takes more work than you may want to put in at the time.
That's true.
Especially at that age.
Especially at that age, for sure. So, I mean, you taught middle school and you said you enjoyed it. You taught it for 4 years. It was around this time where you applied to be an astronaut?
Yep.
Okay.
So I was, teaching middle school and, loving every minute of it and just really felt like education is where I wanted to be and
cool.
Just love the job, love the kids, love the community. And one day a teacher came in and told me that she saw something about NASA wanting to hire some educators to become astronauts. I go, that sounds interesting. As a kid, the Apollo missions were kind of going on, and that was exciting, and I liked reading science fiction and all of that. So, I think a lot of kids think of becoming an astronaut someday because it's, it is cool.
Yeah.
And, going to space is pretty awesome. And so
you can say from experience.
Yeah, it is cool. And, but a lot of times you think of astronauts and you go, well, there's a few people that get to do that. And, it might have been my dream, but it just didn't work out.
Sure.
And so when I heard about NASA wanting to hire some educators, I went online and started reading more about it and what the requirements were. And I just kind of looked at, my resume, kind of like we've done, and, looked at what I had done and looked at what NASA was looking for. And I go, man, I'm a, pretty decent match. So
yeah,
let me go ahead and apply. And, again, you can't win if you don't play. So I just went ahead and submitted my application and was fortunate enough to get hired.
That's amazing. Awesome. So then you kind of transitioned into Houston, started training. Next thing you know, you're on a shuttle mission, right? That's your first shuttle mission was 2009?
Yep, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You go from middle school teacher to, now going into space. And,
yeah.
And it was very, very cool to be able to go on a shuttle flight. And, you go from being a teacher and now when you join NASA as an astronaut, you're starting from step one, so now you're becoming a student. And so, that was a little bit of a challenge just because there's so much you have to learn. Again, astronauts, we come from different fields. Some are medical doctors, I'm a geologist.
Yeah.
And so we all have to learn these basic skills that, some are more challenging than others. You have to learn how to do a spacewalk. You have to learn how to fly the robotic arm. You got to learn about orbital mechanics. I mean, it's like, oh, what are you talking about? You got to learn how to fly a jet. I've never flown before.
Yeah.
And so there's all these things that you have to learn in a short period of time, and it's not easy being a student. And I think I'll be a better teacher someday, having gone back as an adult, becoming a student again and knowing how hard it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because astronaut training, and we talked about this with Randy Bresnik actually a couple episodes ago. But astronaut training is intense because it's you have to be an all-around, I guess, almost not even a jack of all trades, kind of a master of all trades in a sense. I mean, you are working with people on the ground all the time who have your back, but at the same time, you have to know a lot. You have to know a lot of different things.
You do. It's that's part of what makes it exciting, and part of what makes it challenging is that, you're not an expert in any one field.
Sure.
We have all these smart people here at Johnson Space Center that are the experts, but we have to know enough about each one of those so that we can support whatever the mission may be. And so you can go one day, hey, here we're doing a podcast and we're talking about this, and then on Friday I'll be in the neutral buoyancy lab practicing for spacewalks. I'll be in a simulation tomorrow with the robotic arm, and so you're kind of jumping around, going back and forth to different things. And so it's putting all of that together and just being able to process it is the challenge.
Yeah,
but it's fun.
So neutral buoyancy laboratory, you're going to be practicing. That's where you go, I guess, underwater, and they call it neutrally buoyant because you're kind of, I guess, floating and sinking at the same time. Is the phenomenon in a sense?
It's a big swimming pool we have. I mean, it's a big swimming pool that we have.
Yeah.
And so there's a mock-up, kind of a model of the International Space Station there, and we get into spacesuits that have been modified a little bit, but they're pressurized just like a regular suit would be. And we have these great divers that will get you in the water and kind of move weights and foam around to get you to where you are just floating in the water at the right spot. So
kind of like, I guess, suspended?
Yeah, kind of suspended in there, and that's the closest we can get to being in a microgravity environment. And when they do a good job and you're working, you can let go and you don't go up, you don't go down, you're just, right there like you would be in space. So that is another team effort when you look at what it takes to get us in that pool to practice for the spacewalks. But it's pretty cool. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going in there on Friday. I'm sure you've been in there plenty of times before, but also on your space shuttle mission back in 2009, you did 2 spacewalks. You got well over 12 hours of spacewalking time, almost 13. So how does that compare, neutral buoyancy laboratory spacewalking, to your actual experience?
It's as good as we can get, and it's really good. So on Friday coming up is actually my big test, my evaluation. So it's my big test day. I got to cram for that.
Yeah, you should be studying right now.
I know, you guys are killing me. But so I've got a lot to do before Friday. But it is an opportunity for other astronauts and the EVA world, the spacewalk world, to look at your skills and fine tune anything they need to fix. So I've got that. But when you look at being in the pool to being in space, it's really, really good. You know, in the pool, it might be a little bit more physically challenging because you do have, water that you're fighting against, where in space you don't have that.
Okay, yeah.
But in space, you're looking at Earth that's, a couple hundred miles below you.
Right.
And every movement that you make is critical. And so when you get done with the spacewalk, you're really mentally tired. So I think you get out of the NBL and you are super tired. You're ready just to sit on the couch and relax. And after a spacewalk, it's kind of the same. So when you look at the two, it's a pretty good analogy to what you're going to feel like up in space.
Wow. So what were those 2 spacewalks that you were doing on Discovery? What were you doing?
Yeah, so on the first one, which I wasn't, I was the guy inside reading the procedures, putting the last set of solar panels up on the space station.
Oh, I see.
So 2 of my crewmates went out, and so I was able to walk them through that. And then the next couple that we had were just a bunch of odds and ends on the space station. And, one story I tell people about that, it's not always fun to relive it, but, on my first spacewalk, you're all pumped up. This is cool. I'm going to go out and do a spacewalk, and everything's going pretty good. And then I made, a mistake because I kind of got twisted around and did something not the way it was supposed to be.
Okay.
And, now you're bummed out. You're like, man, all this time, everybody's watching you. And, and then you screw this thing up. And and so, you come in and you're a little bit disappointed. The rest of the spacewalk went well, and we got done what we had to do. But now the people on the ground had to try to figure out why something didn't work the way it was planned. And you're reflecting back going, man, I made this mistake. And so you kind of go from this, like, most, the greatest moment ever to, man, this kind of sucks, but it's a good, to me, again, you look at all the little points in your life, and it was, that it's another important point where you learn from failure. I had great crewmates, great leadership around me that allowed me to learn from that experience. And so, again, talking to students that, when you make a mistake, it's not always a bad thing. It's just, how do you rebound and how do you learn from it?
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple instances myself I'm thinking of at the top of my head where, it's just not going to go the way that you're planning. No. Actually, that was my senior project in high school, is what did you learn from this experience? I was like, things do not go the way you planned. I made like a whole storyboard. I had a schedule for scripting and making this film, and just nothing went according to plan. Unlike you, I had friends that constantly bailed on me.
Yeah,
so.
and that's never fun. And, and you can always play it safe and try to minimize the mistakes, but, that's how you learn, and that's what makes it exciting. And and it's okay to mess things up a little bit, and you can reflect on it, but don't let it bring you down too much, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes in life, so you might as well learn how to do it early.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when you were recruited as an astronaut, you said that NASA was looking for educators to go into space. So what was it that you did differently as an educator in space versus, I guess, others?
It's so we came in and we were building on the Teacher in Space program, where they were looking for teachers to fly, as educators, do a lesson plan. Krista McAuliffe went, and that's what she was going to do, and then come back and then go back into teaching, where when they hired us, they were looking at educators to become full-time astronauts. So, for the first time since they opened it up to scientists, early astronauts were all military pilots.
Right, yeah.
And then they opened it up to the sciences, so now we have a wide range of scientists. And in 2004, they opened it up again to include educators, so that if you have a teaching background, it's no different than somebody who's got a background in chemistry or biology.
Wow.
And so, our mission was pretty packed, like most shuttle flights are. So I don't think that we did a whole lot on orbit working with teachers and students, as educators.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing we did is that, I was lucky enough on my flight that I came in with 2 other teachers.
Oh, wow.
Ricky Arnold and Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger. And Ricky and I, we flew together on the shuttle flight. So here you have 2 teachers that are in space together, which is kind of cool. And I think it's was pretty important for educators. But then Ricky and I also went out and did a spacewalk together. So
wow.
Now you've got 2 teachers that are outside, showing that, hey, they have a skill just like anybody else does. So I think it did a lot of good for the teaching profession. I think that when we go out and we talk to educators, they look back at that time, and teachers aren't always valued as much as they should be. We all know the saying, if you can't do, teach. And so
if you can't teach, Jim.
There you go. So, I think to show that teachers have a skill set just like anybody else was important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Awesome. Yes, because you're inspiring teachers, right? Teachers are looking at you and saying, "Wow, I'm a teacher, and that teacher's doing that. That's incredible."
And the same with kids. Kids look at teachers, and they just think, well, everybody knows a teacher.
Yeah.
And so they can relate to a teacher, and you can't always relate to astronauts because you may never meet one. So I think even for students to go, this is somebody, it could be my current math teacher, could be an astronaut. I can be an astronaut.
Yeah.
So I think it's easier for kids to make that leap, but, you can do pretty much whatever you want to do as long as you're, you got to work hard. There is some luck involved. So,
yeah.
But I just think it makes it a little bit more tangible for people.
Sure. Especially because after you went on that mission, did you kind of travel around and go to different speaking engagements, speaking with schools and stuff like that?
As astronauts, we part of our job is to go out and as an educator, my preference is to go out and either talk to teachers or students where, we may have the astronauts that are doctors that may enjoy more going to medical conferences and things like
Makes
that.
sense,
So, I think for the 3 of us that got hired, we always enjoyed going back to schools, going to national conferences where we can talk to teachers and share our experiences. And,
right.
We know that we can go and maybe we can inspire some students, but it's the teachers every day that are making the big difference.
Yeah.
But if we can go in and help them do their job, then I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any kind of teaching moments that you took on your long duration flight? Because you flew again in 2012, Expedition 3132. You were up there for quite a while, 123 days. So what kind of education element did you bring to that mission?
So we tried to do some more outreach with teachers and students.
I see. Okay.
And then we did some filming of different experiments up there that teachers could use.
Cool.
But one of the things that, whether it was intentional or not, while we were educators, now our primary job is to be an astronaut.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the missions are pretty busy. And I think with this upcoming mission, what's unique is that, I'll be launching hopefully in September.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be up there for about 6 months.
Right.
And then Ricky Arnold's going to be going up and, replacing me. So we're going to have a year with educators on orbit, which is kind of, it'll be the first time and is pretty unique. And NASA is, we're currently working on, what can we do while these guys are up there for a year to really highlight education. And so, again, being an astronaut, you never know what's going to happen. And so a lot of this is building as we're talking today.
Right.
But NASA Education is looking at a plan on what can we do to utilize these guys that have a unique skill set as educators. So I think it's going to be a good year for NASA to reach out to educators and students and get a lot done.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. That's
me either.
Great.
More to come. We'll see what happens.
Very cool. Okay, so you have that long duration mission, Expedition 3132 back in 2012. What's different for this one that you have coming up in September?
Every flight is different, especially when they're long duration flights. Again, a shuttle flight was very well, choreographed. Things might happen, but you really knew what you were going to do. Where in a long duration flight, you don't know. You don't know when the toilet's going to break. You don't know, what may happen. And what's neat about today is that NASA's working hard to make the process to get science on board a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. And so there are people submitting science proposals now that could potentially be up there while we're there.
Cool.
And while I'm up there, we're going to have, an additional person working on, on the USOS, the operating side,
right.
The science. So we have another body, which will allow us to do more science.
Okay.
And so I think this time around it's going to be a lot more science, intensive, just because we have an additional person and we just have a wide variety of experiments that are going on. And it's fun because as an astronaut, our job is to facilitate the science that people want to get done up on the space station. And so it could be just like it is here, every day is different. Up there, every single day is different. And
wow.
That's, you never get bored up there, and every mission is definitely different.
Wow. Awesome. So, okay, so you kind of alluded to, you're going to have some education, especially with you going up, followed by Ricky Arnold. We got this year of space educators. Going back to STEM, how do you see the value of STEM, especially being an educator and someone, a STEM educator? What's the value of STEM, and especially, from space, too, how that applies?
Everything we do is all, STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math. And,
right.
Nowadays you'll hear the A put in, they'll call it STEAM,
yes.
to put the arts in,
yeah.
which is very applicable because, a lot of people think that math and science is very rigid and, it's kind of boring, but it's fairly artistic when you look at, math and you look at science.
Creative problem solving.
It is.
Right?
It's what you're doing. You're creating things, whether you're solving the problem or you're discovering something new.
Sure, yeah.
So everything we do here on Earth is, it's you can thank science for it. Somewhere in the STEM field, whether it's the car you drive, the phone you use, the video game you play,
yeah.
All of that is STEM.
Right.
And it's such a wide range that, NASA, people think of NASA and then they think of STEM, but it's every day. I mean, science, technology, engineering, and math is what we do every single day. And I think that's why we like to talk about it, is to let those kids know that it's not that boring, science class that you might have where all you did was read out of a book.
Right.
It really is exciting, and it really, is applicable to what you do every day. And, if you like sports, guess what? The clothes you wear, the new fabric that you have, that's all science. That's engineering.
Yeah.
The basketball, the baseball. I mean, everything we do is STEM related, and
right.
we just don't always realize that.
It's amazing. So, kind of going back all the way to the beginning of your story where you were talking about kind of being inspired to pursue geology because of some camping trips. Why did you choose something STEM? Why'd you go that route versus like a journalist or like, writing about the outdoors or something? Why'd you go science?
Well, maybe because it was, easier. I'm not the best writer out there. I'm definitely not, an actor type. And, for me, luckily math was, relatively easy. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know. It just seemed like that was the natural fit. And, I was lucky enough that, I could find a field that I really enjoyed. And so, again, when I talk to students when I go out, it's like, just find something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid of something that's hard, because, then you're going to limit what you can do.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I make a better scientist than I would a journalist, though. I'm glad we have different people out there with,
different skill sets.
Yeah. Different things that they enjoy doing. So I thank all of you journalists that are out there.
Yeah, honestly, it's everything kind of has a purpose, and you're right. Pursue what you love. Some people they love the storytelling aspect, so they'll go for that. Others, they want to know the whys, and they want to be outside touching things. So,
but if you don't do something you love, life is going to be long.
Yeah,
because it makes a big difference when you have a job that you enjoy, and fortunate enough to have one like that. But just try to find something that you really enjoy and work hard at it.
Very cool. So we'll leave. I feel like that would be a great place to leave our audience, but I do want to ask one more question. Okay. So, us at NASA, especially from your educator perspective, what can we do at NASA to sort of really convince people that STEM is a great field to go into? Or STEAM.
Yeah, I think if NASA can share what we do, you use the word convince. I don't think we need to to convince anybody because the work we do is important. I think our biggest challenge is telling people, what we do here. And, NASA is this, it's a big entity. We're doing a lot of cool things, but, we have journalists, we have the divers at the NBL, we have, engineers. So there's a lot going on there that, people can, if they want to join NASA to help, the cause that we have of exploring, helping life on Earth. But, our biggest challenge is sharing what we do every day because it is cool. Going into space is great. It's great being an astronaut, but that is such a small part of what we do.
Yeah.
And the hard part is just it's getting out there and sharing it with folks. So that's, I think, the job that we all have for anybody that works at NASA.
Definitely. Very cool. Well, Joe, I think that's all the time we have for our listeners. I think stay tuned for till after the music, and we'll let you know how to submit an idea or maybe ask a question. But Joe, that was awesome. I just want to thank you for your time today. I know this was quite a long time, especially compared to the other thing you had to do, and it sounds like you have a pretty jam-packed week with learning how to operate in a robotic arm and going in the neutral buoyancy laboratory. So I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's going to be a good week, and hopefully we can talk when I get back, and we'll share the post-flight experience.
Yeah, I hope so. Can't wait to see what you're going to do in orbit.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
Houston, go ahead. Stop of the space shuttle. Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Shuttle has cleared the tower. Became a stage for all mankind.
Actually, a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Never Houston, welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So today we talked with Joe Acaba, U.S. astronaut, and he is going to be going to space very soon at the time of this recording. So if you want to follow him along on his journey, he has a Twitter account, @AstroAcaba, and he'll be sharing his experience on board as an astronaut and an educator in space. We'll also be sharing his story on the International Space Station accounts and an account called NASA Astronauts. Just go to either one of those accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're verified, so don't even worry about it. And we'll be sharing his experience, maybe some of the cool views that he shares, maybe some videos or some moments he shares with educators that he'll be talking to while on orbit. Just use the hashtag AskNASA or the hashtag HWAP, HWHAP, Houston, we have a podcast. Use any of those on your favorite platform, submit an idea for the show or maybe a question you have for Joe, and we'll make sure to address it on one of the later podcasts. This podcast was recorded on July 10th, 2017. Thanks to Alex Perryman, John Stoll, Pat Ryan, and John Streeter. And thanks again to Mr. Joe Acaba for coming on the show. We'll see you next week.